What if I told you the Dow could hit 100,000? And that might not even be the craziest part, because if the Dow doubles, you know what happens at Nasdaq? It typically triples. And Bitcoin, it can move 3 to 6 times faster. But here's this twist most people are missing. When the Dow doubles, it doesn't mean what you think it means. Today we're breaking down step by step what actually happens to the S&P, Nasdaq, and assets like Bitcoin if the Dow was to hit 100,000 using history, math, and macro cycles. And I'm going to explain to you why we mention in this $100,000 number for the Dow. All right. Once again, I'm Sam. Welcome to Empower Capital. Make sure to like, share, subscribe. Remember, this content is for educational purposes only. This is not legal, tax, or financial advice. Make sure to do your own research. All right. Let's rock and roll. All right. So first thing first, what does Dow 100 really mean? What does that 100,000 number really mean? And where is this coming from? So first context, the Dow is price weighted and contains 30 large industrial companies. When people say Dow at 100K, they're usually thinking massive economic boom, tariff-driven growth, industrial resurgence, or strong inflation-driven nominal expansion. But here's what matters. When the Dow doubles, historically, it usually happens during expansion cycles, productivity surges, liquidity expansion, multiple expansion, right? Important distinction is this. A doubling of the Dow can happen because earning grows. Right now, the Dow is around 50K. 100K means double, right? Valuation expands. Inflation hits asset prices, or a combination of all three, right? And each of those scenarios impact S&P, Nasdaq, and assets like Bitcoin differently. And these are indexes, right? That all move in similar fashion. And the reason why we're saying 100,000, because the President of the United States mentioned at the World Economic Forum that the Dow will double soon. And then later on, he tweeted just about a week or so ago, twice in a 24-hour period, saying before his term ends, the Dow will hit 100,000. So that's basically where we're getting the number from. So the next thing that we're going to talk about now is what happens to the S&P. The S&P 500 is broader than the Dow. Historically, in major bull cycles, the S&P moves roughly in line with the Dow, okay? And sometimes slightly outperforms due to tech exposure. So for example, if the Dow is equal to 100%, right? Reasonable historical expectations usually mean S&P is 90 to 120%. Why? Because it contains large tech growth names, healthcare names, financial companies. It's more diversified and earning weighted. So if the Dow goes to 100K, S&P likely lands near similar doubling, right? But this is where it gets interesting, okay? Let's talk about the Nasdaq effect, okay? The Nasdaq is growth heavy, and growth stocks do not move linearly in bull markets, okay? In strong expansion plus liquidity environments, Nasdaq tends to outperform significantly because it moves faster. Example, historical tendencies, right? In tech-led bull markets, Nasdaq outpaces Dow by 1.5x to 2x. So it does double, or 1.5 or 0.5 of the other one. So in liquidity super cycles, multiplies, expands aggressively. Growth multiples expands aggressively. So if the Dow doubles, Nasdaq could do 130% to 200%. Why? Because AI expansion, productivity gains, or real rates, right? Capital rotation into growth, right? Growth benefits disproportionately from optimism and capital flows. But now let's talk about the wild cards, okay? Yeah, so what are the wild cards? So let's talk about Bitcoin, okay? So Bitcoin does not move like stocks. It moves like a high volatility liquid asset, All right, they move in similar direction. A risk on momentum vehicle. This is Bitcoin. When equities rally strongly during expansion cycles, Bitcoin historically amplifies the move, right? Past major risk cycles show that equity bull markets, right? Bitcoin often moves X to 6X relative to index gains. So now let's think about that, right? If the Dow doubles, conservative case, Bitcoin will be 200 to 300% of that. Okay, of that doubling. Aggressive cycle case will be 400 to 700%. But here's the warning: Bitcoin volatility cuts both ways during pullbacks. If it falls harder, right? Liquidity drains faster, right? Because it's a faster asset, right? It's like the Lamborghini versus the Hyundai or something, right? Sentiment shifts rapidly. So upside is amplified, but so is the downside, right? Higher risk, higher potential for reward, right? And then now let's discuss the real question, right? The real question is not, can the Dow hit 100K? The real question is, under what condition does it hit 100K? Is it real productivity? Is it AI revolution? Industrial reshoring? Is it massive liquidity expansion? Right? Is it inflation driven nominal growth? Right? Because if inflation drives the move, you may not actually be richer in real terms because everything's just getting more expensive. Nominal gains are not the same as real purchasing power. It's the part headlines won't tell you. Okay? Nominal gains are not the same as real purchasing power. So moving forward, so how do we like think about this strategically, right? If you believe in a long-term expansion cycle, the strategy isn't prediction, it's positioning. Ask yourself this: do I want broad exposure to something like the S&P, or do I want growth amplification to something like Nasdaq, or high volatility asymmetric upside like Bitcoin? Or do I want a mix of them? The biggest mistake investors make is this: reacting emotionally after the move has already happened. But bull markets reward positioning before consensus. Bear markets punish leverage and emotion. Yeah, think about that. So if the Dow does hit 100,000, as the president says, the S&P likely doubles, the Nasdaq likely outperforms, and Bitcoin, it could shock everyone again. But the real edge isn't predicting numbers, it's understanding cycles. All right. So now let's try to put actual numbers to this. I need a calculator somewhere. Let's say NASDAQ doubles. All right. And we saw the max that the Bitcoin can do in what we just looked at was 700%. All right. So let's do 700%. That's a 7x from where Bitcoin price was when this news was released. Right. So when the news was released, Bitcoin was around 70K. So if we did a 7x on 70K, do the math. 70,000 times 7x. So based on the way Bitcoin moves relative to the Dow and how the S&P and Nasdaq, if we want to sort of predict what Bitcoin price would be if the Dow doubles, we can literally do 7 times 70,000 when this news was released. That is $490,000 Bitcoin, right? So again, this is not financial advice. This is just me sharing my thoughts. Next, we're breaking down what would have to happen in interest rates and liquidity for Dow 100K to actually become reality. So see you in the next one. All right. And make sure to remember that God loves you. Stay blessed. We want to see you succeed. All right. Bye.